All right. Well, welcome everybody to this conference, and a special welcome for everybody around the world who's joining here. My name is Hein Beuten. I've been working with this company for the last 16 years, and I had several roles in product management related to the human motion products, including the NVM product line, but also the Movella DOT development platform. And I like to work on the forefront of innovation. So back in, I think it was 2016, we started thinking about the concept of the dots on paper. And we could have only dreamt of having so many great applications that we have today. The first day of the conference, we had a great lineup of speakers, a selection of our users speaking about mobile force plate, gait for humans and also for dogs, running, sleeping, biomechanics, sport balance, rehabilitation, all using the Movella DOT. And before I hand over, I would like to point out some guidelines for this conference. Questions can be posted in the questions tab at the lower right corner and will be answered in the Q&A at the end of the presentations. If your question for some reason has not been answered, we will get back to you in the next couple of days with an answer. That leaves me to wish you a great conference. I hope it will inspire you and give you new ideas for your important work that you're doing. And maybe someday you can present the work that you've done with the DOT during a future conference. So have fun. And with this, I hand over to our host, Martina Ravizza.
Thank you, Hein. Thank you for the introduction. And welcome everybody to the Movella DOT Developer Conference 2023. I'm really excited to host this conference today and tomorrow. So I'm gonna share the agenda of the day. A brief introduction about Movella DOT. So Movella DOT is our wearable sensor and IMU, including an accelerometer, gyroscope, like magnetometer, and can be used thanks to the Bluetooth protocol that we implemented, so can be connected to mobile devices, but also laptop. And is a platform meant for developers. So developers, researchers, engineers can use DOT to develop their solution. And today we will hear about an amazing solution from 5 speakers that are CEO, founder, researchers, and engineers that are using Movella DOT to develop their solution. So as you see, the first speaker will be Mike Crooks from RightStep. Should be already here. So Mike, you can join the stage. Here we are. Hi, Mike. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you. Hello, everybody.
All right. So Mike is from RightStep, is a company based between UK and Estonia, is the founder of RightStep, and he will talk about the developing of a mobile force plate with Movella DOT. When I heard the first time about his application, I couldn't wait to meet him because I was really impressed. So Mike, the stage is yours.
Okay, well, let's get started. First of all, thanks everyone for joining. And thank you to Movella for having me here. It's a real honor to be presenting to everyone. So I want to tell the story of how RightStep came to be. It's quite a long one, so we're going to go at a fast pace. And we originated from a research paper. Probably like many solutions in sports, in healthcare, and solutions that use the dots, probably originates from a university somewhere or some intrigue where there's some research going on. We're the same. And I met the professor, I just call him the professor now, back in 2014. And he was studying the aging population and in particular osteoporosis, and came up with a variety of algorithms that used acceleration to manage and monitor forces and loading and weight-bearing activities for the purposes of osteoporosis in his research. And from this point, I was intrigued. I'm a software engineer, so I was intrigued from the point of view of how can I turn this thing into something that we can get real users to use in an everyday situation. This presentation will go through why that didn't happen. Many of the challenges, and let's call them failures, everyone likes to, you know, fail fast is a buzz term, and where we ended up in the end. So if we can flick to another slide, I'll press it and see if you can see the next one, which should be paper to notebook. And what I found at the beginning was that I could get heavily involved in various aspects of technical tooling, cool stuff that I could potentially build, and somewhat went down the rabbit hole of technologies and tools that I could use and play with, and somewhat missed the point. So we rewound. We probably lost around 6 months of doing various things that were arguably useless, and we rewound ourselves. And essentially what we had was we had an algorithm, we had some research outcomes, and we had a load of data. So what I wanted to do once I realized I should not just be playing around with technology for the sake of it, was to try and bring the research paper into software. Validate that algorithm would be reproducible in a variety of scenarios where we could deploy this kind of thing in software. So what I mean is, can we put it on a mobile device? Can we put it on a connected device like a Raspberry Pi? Can we put it as a web service? And so one of the most common languages today is Python, and the Python notebook allows plenty of opportunity to do this kind of thing and explore the potential. And I use these things probably every day. There's no doubt I use them every day to either develop something, test something. I've been recently building out a sort of database, so I've been connecting to that, administering it all from a Python notebook. And even in sort of client work, I've been able to use the Python notebook to share the outcome with a customer. We can build interactive dashboards these days. I mean, the options are really endless. And the other benefit of doing this, it's got a lot of scientific libraries in there that are well used throughout the data science community. And so you also get plenty of help, like if you're stuck with things. The Python community is amazing. Actually, you know, many of the languages, the community on Stack Overflow can really get you out of a hole. And you know, the old cliche is that developers don't really write anything; they just Google it, which is to some degree true for me. But anybody who's looking to take you know, research papers onto the next stage, I highly recommend using Python and Python notebooks to be able to do that, if you do not do that already. So following on from that, we had many failed applications. Wrong use cases, wrong markets, wrong technologies, wrong pretty much everything for many years. We were just one of the challenges we had was that the research group were very focused in their field of research, of course, and that's absolutely fair enough. However, when we took this out to the market and we started to have a conversation with who might be a target user, who might be using this thing in the real world, the healthcare system in the UK, we actually spoke to a group of people who were suffering from osteoporosis in Northeast London, and the stories they brought tears to your eyes. And what we realized was that it was going to be a very challenging approach to using what was research around how to improve bone density, and then to apply that to people who actually were suffering, because the risk associated to it was very high. So we went back to the drawing board multiple times in that, disheartened to some degree with the fact that we weren't able to do that. And the natural, I guess, progression, it was more of a regression, was that we were to consider preventative medicine or preventative activities to, you know, so people wouldn't end up, or reduce the likelihood of people ending up in an osteoporotic state. And again, when we spoke to the business world about this kind of thing, we ended up with there's going to be billions spent on marketing and all the rest of it. So we were quite downhearted by the fact that we'd built some tooling for this particular area, and it wasn't going to be going to be for us. So we'd also started to build out like ideas and that might work. So we built an Android application that had linked to a Movella DOT at the time, and then we wanted to explore other sort of use cases where we could put sensors in different places and try to apply the research to different segments of the body, different activities. And I found I really struggled to manage multiple sensors in Android on my own, because these sensors didn't come with the SDK that Movella DOT does, that gives you that management of multiple sensors out of the box. So even at sensor level, we were struggling to sort of build out our solution. And we went round and round and round the circles of product tech, to the point where I just started going, wouldn't it be good if we could do all of this fancy stuff? And I sort of gave up on the business side of it and the marketing side of it. And I just did what I was sort of good at, or at least what I found interesting. And I started to build out, simplify wearable technology, at least try to, into some very simple categories of where technology could play a role. Quite simply, from the sensors, we didn't have to worry about those anymore because of using the Movella DOT. The edge, some people refer to this as a gateway. In industrial applications, we have edge devices. These are like mobile devices that have quite a bit of compute power on them. So we had these sensors coming into an edge where we could do some computation if we wanted to. And then we had the idea that we can sort of real time stream this data over a mobile network of some description. And then we could do all this fancy computations. Everything would end up in a data store, and ultimately be able to view this real time as things were happening. And we got carried away with like, what the use case? Wouldn't it be great? Like, don't you think doctors really like this? Don't you think? And you know, the truth be told, they probably didn't. But from a tech point of view, it was cool. We continued to play with this. I mean, so when I say we, it was me, locked away under the stairs for a bit. And we kept on going like down this route. And you know what happened? The outcome of this was that I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how much we can do in these days in the cloud infrastructure without having to write a line of code. So all of these components that we had were open source. They were just containerized. I could spin them up in Kubernetes, which I use Azure as my cloud provider. I could spin it up super easy in there, and I could have things, data flying all over the place, compute stuff, and it was all very sexy-like. But it didn't really lend itself to getting a business off the ground. So once again, I regressed, and I went back to the sort of the notion of the MVP, or the minimum viable product, as I'm sure everyone's heard a billion times. And what I find with an MVP these days is that an MVP is super complicated because everyone's done a lot of stuff already. There's a lot of people doing cool stuff in almost every industry. And so what does your MVP look like? So I went down the route of a self-contained tablet, specifically a tablet app. Everything would run on the device. I wouldn't have any back-end infrastructure to manage, nothing. I just have the whole solution self-contained in a tablet. And this had a bunch of benefits. We could compute the metrics that we want to compute right there on the device. As I said earlier, the SDK with the Movella DOT is really simple, and it's really nice to implement. In fact, when I migrated from the previous sensors and ripped out all of that code and put the SDK for the Movella DOT in, it took me under 48 hours to have the whole thing up and running. And secondly, I reduced my code base quite significantly, which makes everything like really easy to manage. One of the things I like about having the SDK implemented the way that I've got it is that I don't have to touch it now. I've pretty much got all the functionality of the DOT implemented. I don't have to really revisit that. I can really just focus now on front end part of the application, how we want to design things, except I don't touch that, my wife does, and how, because I'm useless at that. So how we can get the functionality that the user might want into the application without having to worry about native services and managing sensors and all this other stuff. So we made it like super simple, and we tried to, truly what is the minimum viable product. And you know what? It's not quite there. At this point, we're mixed in our viewpoint as to whether this was an MVP or is it just a stepping stone towards an MVP. And the reason I say that is when we started to demonstrate this application out to, close friends or to, friendly customers, people see what we could do with the sensors, and we could measure this this loading intensity, this weight bearing activity, the forces applied at where we put the sensors, and they, if I say so myself, people were quite excited by this proposition that we could do this, but it didn't just stop there and say, yeah, that's great, I'll buy one, right? It was more like, well, what if we do this, and how do we do that, and wouldn't it be great if we could do these things? And things started to scale out of control in terms of what people were asking for, or ideas that they had. And RightStep has a vision, right, to participate in rehabilitation. It has a vision to participate in sports performance. And with all these things, there are processes involved. There are a multitude of people that help and work with a given individual. And it's one thing I've learned from working in software in the enterprise is that there's just processes that you go through, and the things have to plug into these processes to allow them to work. So we ended up again going a bit off the scale with our technology. We're trying to model out rehabilitation programs. We're trying to figure out how we might integrate into the multitude of systems that hospitals have, and X, Y, and Z. And again, we had to sort of rein it in a bit in order to figure out what our actual MVP was going to be. And this is what we've ended up with. This is what we have today. This is what runs today. And there's a few messages I'd like to get out at this point. We tried to use things that were free. All our authentication is provided by Auth0. It's super easy to put into React apps. It's super easy to put into anything, and it's free. And you get two-factor authentication, you get user management, you get tokens, you get everything. And it's a great way to get up and running. And it also looks like your application is super amazing because you've got authentication in it. And as my personal preference in building authentication, I hate it. If there's anything in software I hate, is that. So I also use MongoDB, and I use the Atlas on the cloud version. I use the free tier. The way that we have our API, and because we don't really store data, we compute it. We also use the free tier, so it's free. Everything that we collect from our application now, we use a file store as a backend. So essentially our files are segmented like a database model, but we just store them in Azure Blob Storage. And it cost me 11 cents last month. And we've got hundreds and hundreds of files in there at the moment. The other part of that is that what I'm trying to say here is that building a complex MVP, or what seems to be quite a complex MVP, can cost you a load of money if you do it in a certain way. But there are many ways where you can use the tooling within these cloud providers, and you can use the free tiers and you never exceed it. The only thing that we have that costs money right now is that we put API, so we have what's called a modular monolith. So back in the day, monoliths everything was built into the one code base, and then microservices came along, so we separated everything. And in doing so, we end up with a management and orchestration nightmare that actually, in some cases, costs you more money. So we ended up using an approach called a modular monolith, where we make our services as modules within the same API service. And therefore, like when we want to scale out, we can separate them out if we want to. but everything's self-contained, so we can run it on a single CPU. In fact, I think we only run it on the size of a Raspberry Pi in Azure, although it's expensive up there. So we have all our connections to Azure is in there. We have our token validation is in there. We have our models are in there. We have our actual compute engine, which we call an execution engine, that computes everything that we want. So in our case, it's loading intensity, ground reaction force, it's frequency responses. We do limb symmetries, we do statistics, but it's all done in our execution engine. And that brings me over to the right-hand side. So the way that we compose our APIs is that when I looked at a lot of things in biomechanics or sports science where we're trying to compute from a raw data set. So in our case, it's acceleration. There's a bunch of steps that we go through. Sometimes we filter things, sometimes we compute magnitude vectors, sometimes we we might do the frequency response, then we might do some other pieces. But all of these things in my mind are just functions. And so we create a function bank and we dump all these functions in it. We store code as strings and we just put all these functions there. And then what we do with that is we compose what we call pipelines. We compose these things together and then we sit them in the database. And pipelines can be composed together again to make workflows. So our current workflow that produces our outputs are, we have a data connector that connects to Azure, pulls out the data we want. We have a loading intensity pipeline, which consists of a prep pipeline that basically computes 5-second windows of the acceleration data and then passes that to the compute piece, which computes the loading intensity. And we do that for ground reaction force as well. And then the final piece is a frequency response. And we compose that workflow and our execution engine just says, okay, what workflow do you want to execute? Okay, I'm going to execute it and give you back all the results. Now, that might sound like a lot of computation, and quite frankly, it is. But because of the fact that we have, none of us, the sensors depend on each other. So we compute forces at the sensor side. So what that allows us to do from a software point of view is parallelize everything. I mean, I say parallelize loosely. It means that we can just compute for one sensor, the second sensor, and third sensor all at the same time. And this reduced our computation time by, I wouldn't like to say how much, but all of that takes anywhere between 0.9 and about 2.5 seconds to compute. And all that's running in a single container on one CPU. So the way that we like to envision doing this is if we have opportunities to, let's say we wanted to do something to do with balance in our sensor configuration, we can do that. So what we would do is we would develop any functions we don't have already, which we probably have most of them. We compose a pipeline and we create a workflow for balance. And then that would be stored in our MongoDB instance. When we want to add that into we make that live within our API, which is automatic because as long as it's in the database, it comes through to the front end. And then we can just execute the workflows that we want to. And this is something I believe is potentially missing in the world of sports science research and sort of healthcare solutions. And I saw a LinkedIn post not long ago about sort of domain-driven design and sort of unifying data sources across different departments. So there's in this case, the dot data is the same, and we can just compute different things from it. So that's why we've designed this API as what we call a composable API, because we can add features and functions really quite simply and deploy them without having to take down any of our infrastructure. It just appears like magic. And that's something we're quite excited about. Right now, obviously, it's part of our product, so we only have the loading workflows within it. But maybe it's something in the future that we can build out and maybe even open source at some point. So in the interest of time, I'll move on to just the key points. Since this is the Movella's conference and it's about the DOT, I just wanted to highlight some points of why we went from using cheap sensors through to established companies' sensors to then settling on the Movella DOT. And I've mentioned multiple times the SDK integration, and I'm talking from an Android point of view, to be honest. Was super easy. It took us less than 48 hours to do. the SDK handles multiple sensors, so we're not messing around trying to manage multiple sensors. It's being done for us, so we can really get on with the actual application that we want to. Movella and Xsens have a history in sensors, so it's just like the background and the you know what they've done in the past when it comes to sensor fusion and just sensors in general. It's something that you can hang your hat on. Something that's really nice, and I was with a customer yesterday and just showed, you know, what is the hardware that you've got. I pulled out the box and they were like, it's ready to go right now. It's shipped like a, you know, it's a bit like a Apple iPhone unboxing event, which is really useful for people like me, because, you know, we don't want to spend our time dealing with boxes and hardware and stuff. We just want to, you know, ship it out. And that's a really, really probably something that's not talked about benefit of the Movella DOT. And you know, I'd like to mention that over the period of time I've been working with Movella, I think it's a year and a half, maybe a bit longer. The process around the DOT, the support, people are on hand, fixing things, the roadmaps are available, and things are just getting better and better. And it's been a real pleasure to work with the DOT. We've got lots of them here, and you know, we're very happy to be partnered with Movella too. So what's next for us? Obviously, we're going to continuously stress what we've built. That can never be, you can never do too much of that. You know, we've got a handful of people using our platform, but what happens when more and more and more people come on, and what is it about, how does that affect cost? I don't think I really considered cost, like engineering related to infrastructure and operational cost before, and how, you know, how sort of structuring your code can save you pennies and pounds on CPU usage and things like that. It's really important to do particularly when scaling, which we're not doing yet, of course. But at the same time, when we talk about our MVP, we don't want to be spending hundreds of dollars on just getting something up and running in the cloud, right? We want to keep it as sort of free as possible. I had an issue with memory, which is my own fault, but it turns out I just had a bug, thankfully, so I should have taken that point off. But again, it's like one of these things, like how much, you know, what are the constraints of the software that we're implementing? Like in the research paper, they monitor people all day. You know, that's not something we do right now, for many reasons, but these constraints are how you might structure your applications going forward and what that means for your infrastructure. We're going to add some more workflows that support our loading measurements and why these loadings might be happening. We're also looking at how we're going to provide integration access to the API. Auth0 as a unit actually provide us with keys, so we might be able to do something like that. And then add ChatGPT. Well, it wouldn't be a developer conference if we didn't mention the hype around ChatGPT and AI. We actually did integrate into the API for fun, but as I say on our front end, it's like, please seek the advice of a human, preferably an expert human. But nonetheless, you know, with large language, like in the serious side of it, large language models and AI may add value to some of the applications we're building to sort of enhance the capability of what we're getting from sensor data. So I hope with that kind of introduction to what we're up to, where we've been, what we're doing, gives you some idea of, you know, that it's not as easy as it sounds when you want to take a research paper to market. We're at the beginning of our journey. We're a company for 6 months, only 6 months so far. I feel like we're making some strides. We've built some cool things, and we'll continue to try and you know, improve what we do and bring our products to the market in the very near future. So once again, thanks everyone for paying attention and listening. And I hope you enjoyed it. And thanks, Martina, for having me.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for your presentation. It's really impressive. It's an amazing work. I just have a few questions.
Sure.
We have 4 minutes. So, well, how did you validate your result, especially with regard to ground reaction forces? How do you compare your results?
So this is something that's out of scope of the presentation, but nonetheless, the research people and the universities we're doing further work in the ground reaction force part. The ground reaction force from our algorithms was an accident. We were focused on the rate application of force, at least that's what the professors were. And so that makes a lot of sense and is invalidated by, I think, 3,500 patients and bone density studies and all the rest of it. The ground reaction force is simply a mathematical construct that, because we compute body weight per second, if we remove the per second, we end up with body weight, which is kind of a unit that is produced by a force plate. And therefore, like, mathematically, it makes sense. Now, is it validated against a force plate today? No. It is something on our list of things to do, because, as I say, it was a pure accident when we were looking at the derivation of the algorithm. And we may or may not continue to use ground reaction force, but with any luck, and it is a bit of luck in that when we do validate it, well, at least we put force plates and our stuff side by side, which will happen in the next couple of weeks. We will, with any luck, have ground reaction force as a validated parameter.
All right, thank you. Well, looking for seeing your results.
Yeah, me too.
We have another question.
Sure.
So you mentioned ChatGPT is a really actual topic now, and everybody is curious to know more, to use it, but to use it in the best way. So how do you think ChatGPT will improve your solution? What is your vision in future?
Well, it's a good question, and there's no good answer to that because we just don't know. Personally, I'm quite cynical towards people who refer to AI loosely. I've worked in an AI company for the best part of 6 years in industrial AI, and to be honest, we didn't have any AI. It was just that a computer produced some predictions or some results, and then everyone said it was AI. But that's in my opinion, that's not strictly true. As far as ChatGPT goes, if it improves itself in the sense that we can validate where the information is coming from. So I've got a very simple thing where I'd say, like, there's a parameter of lower limb symmetry index, I think it is, right? And if let's say it's less than 80%, we consider that to be bad. Right. So I asked ChatGPT, like, what is your opinion on less than 90% lower limb symmetry? And every time it gives me back a different answer. Now they're similar. They're similar in the sense that, like, oh, it could be injury risk, it could be like performance degradation, etc. But it doesn't give me the same answer twice. Okay. Right. So right now, I think a lot of people have found that that's the case. And without the validation, like in science, right, we have to validate the sources. We have to make sure the papers we're doing using are, correct and all the rest of it. There's going to be a whole piece that has to be done around that before anyone can really use it. However, the techniques used there are super clever. Okay. And I think making models more accessible is going to really give us a whole bunch of things we don't even know we could do yet.
Okay, thank you for answering. So it's Pleasure. An amazing tool, but we still need to understand how to use it in a proper way. Let's say.
I think so, yeah.
All right. So thank you very much, Mike, for joining, for presenting.
Thank you for having me.
Now it's time to move to the other speaker, but thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Speak soon. All right, take care.
Bye, thank you. I'm happy now to introduce Daniel Jordanov from...
Hello.
Hi, Daniel. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Great. So Daniel is working for Biomechanics Solution based in Spain. He's in Madrid, and he's a biomedical engineer specializing in biomechanics and ergonomics. And he's leading the R&D of Biomechanics Solution. And today he will talk about the different solution that he implemented with Movella DOT, and you can describe better your work.
Thanks for the introduction. As Martina told, I am Daniel. I am the Research and Development Engineer at Biomechanics Solutions. And what I would like to tell you here in this presentation is just a brief introduction of what we do here in the local market in Spain. And after that, get to the technical side. So from the first, part, the introduction of ourselves, we are a company called Rivas Group. We have 3 main lines, which are Biomech, Instrutech, and Movart. And all of these lines have led us to gain a lot of knowledge in customization, in signal analysis, and in different tools for performing custom interfaces for data analysis. So just MoveArt, it's our line for neurorehabilitation and robotics devices. Instrutech, it's our line for industrial solutions, for sensors in aerospace, automotive, civil engineering, etc. And finally, the most important for this scope, which is Biomech. Biomech, it's our company with 10 years of history dedicated to mainly distribution, commissioning, and training in devices and systems for biomechanical analysis. And since 1 year and a half, something like that ago, we started to offer a custom development area. Okay, so what we do in this area, it's we offer 2 modules: integrations and custom solutions. I guess you are seeing that, right, Martina? The integrations and custom solutions.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. So what we do in our 2 lines mainly, it's first of all, as we have a lot of experience with top leading biomechanics technologies such as Movella, Delsys, Hawking Dynamics, Novo, 1080 Motion, Vertec, and we have worked with the API and SDK of all of these solutions to just get more insights about the data they offer, getting deeper insights to customers about how to exploit the data, the capabilities of its system. With all of this experience, we launched the line based on custom solutions. So how works this line? It mainly works on basically and mainly in the interest of the customers and the users. So first of all, first step, it's to choose what do you want to analyze: motion capture, EMG, forces. In this case, I will focus completely on what we do in motion capture with Movella DOT sensors, which have been like a groundbreaking technology and wearable solution for us. We offer different movement analysis, different combination of amount of sensors, and where do we put the sensors. And also, after we have like the hardware, the setup, we work with the user in a completely scalable and customized way on the variables they want to analyze, the graphic interface they will have to see the data, and how this data will be stored and exported. So, okay, continuing with the presentation. How do we work, or how we launched this solution, these graphic interfaces? As we are a small team, and we are, I will talk later about the team for this solution, this custom development software solution. We decided to start very easily with things that were already done. So our software is mainly based in 3 stages, and now it's where I start like the technical part, and I will explain more or less how do we do it. So the first part, we measure with the Movella DOT app, which is available through App Store, Play Store, and iOS, Android devices. For us, it's very easy to use, and also our aim was to take the biomechanical analysis out of the lab as much as possible. So with just a mobile phone and some sensors, you can go to any treadmill, you can go to any field, to any pitch, to any athlete's track, whatever, and you can just get very easily some raw data that we will going to work and transform in some interpretable and biomechanics validated data. The second step is, of course, as we use the Movella DOT app, we need to export this data. And in this case, we are also going to the best and more easy solution, which is use the Movella DOT exporter. It enables us with the USB cable to do a very quick transfer of all the files. And finally, of course, I am talking of this solution. It's at this moment is offline, which has its advantages and drawbacks. But the main advantages we saw is that you don't have to pay attention in real time on if the movement is or the recording is getting proper, if the sensors are losing data. So we work completely on the offline mode of the Movella DOT sensors. And after that, with all that reliable and high fidelity data, we do the data analysis. So after the export, we go to the analyze stage, which is where our graphic interface gets into the scene and allow the users to analyze a wide range of different variables. And I am going to show you just some quick examples of gait, running, and jumping. But of course, it could be adapted to any movement or any interest of research for our user. Okay, so slide number 7. Okay, about the measuring stage. Okay, how do we do the setup? So as I advanced before, we use the Movella app. In this case, we have managed to be able to use 7 sensors. So this is mainly also why we use the offline mode, because if you want to use online mode, it's only up to 5 sensors. But when using 7 or 8 sensors and with any modern Android or iOS device, we are able to get valuable information from 7 different body segments. The placing is very similar to MVN Analyze, which is the reference for us, because we have the system. We have been working with Movella long years ago, and for us it's like the best system to compare in real-time conditions and real environment conditions field. So we try to just stick to that placement. And for the setup, we mainly pay attention in 3 basic set configuration or parameters, which is the time synchronization. It's very valuable for us because as much sensors we use, we need them to be time synchronized because, as I will go explain later, we do a lot of data segmentation, psychoanalysis, event detection for spatial and temporal parameters. So we rely quite a lot on the Movella DOT app for this time synchronization. We use the maximum sampling frequency that it's allowed to being able to record from gait to running analysis, even jumping, as I am going to show later. And of course, another very, very good and exciting feature of the Movella DOT is the capability of performing the magnetic field mapper, which allow us to the standardization of the magnetic field and avoid as much as possible any interference, which gives us data quality that it cannot be achieved with any other sensor. Once we have set up the sensors, the configuration, we are ready to measure, and we do 2 types of measurement. Okay, as I told, we rely a lot on MVN Analyze. So first thing we do is calibration recording. Why? With 2 purposes mainly. As we all know, the sensors are relative oriented. They give relative orientation, so I need to align them with the body segments to get same common reference for all the body segment and being able to get joint angles or other kinematic variables. So first, we use the accelerometer of the sensor to do a vertical alignment. After that, we do just a dynamic stage of walking, just 8 to 10 steps. It's not mandatory to do any amount of steps, but just walk in a straight line mainly, or just doing a circle or something like that. But the idea from here is that we apply principal component analysis. So we get the maximum axis of variability, which is the sagittal plane in walking, and we get the minimum axis of variability, which is the frontal axis of movement. And with this, we convert the sensor orientation to body segment orientation and the orientation of the body segments regarding the calibration posture and calibration orientation I had at the beginning of the trial. And all of this, as we do not use the magnetometer, we use it in the next stages, but I will explain for what we use it. And we don't use the magnetometer, at least for disorientation alignment, so that also avoid us having magnetic interference. And after that, using the quick setup of the Movella DOT app, we just do a lot of measurements, start and stop, and we record them in the internal memory of the sensors. After that, once we have allowed the user to record all the trials or the data he wants to do, we go to the exporter. Okay, we just recommend the USB cable mode, which is the output data we select. Orientation in quaternions format, just to avoid the misinterpretation of Euler angles. So we work with the raw quaternion data to transform it after that. The acceleration that allow us to detect some events, to analyze specifically the vertical acceleration in running, jumping. We use the angular velocity. For us, it's a very important variable, not only for the calibration, but also for phase segmentation, because we can see when body segment starts to rotate or not. And in this case, we use the magnetometer just to analyze the module of the magnetometer and see if, despite all the steps we have been doing before and all the careful we have been, if we are detecting any part of the signal, small parts of the signal where the norm is completely out of range. So we just do an interpolation. And to be honest here, this we usually apply it to short periods of time. Okay. And we also, after the data is exported through our graphic interface, to help the user to manage the data and to not have all the files in the same folder and being difficult to organize them for inside of folders like subject, movement, trial 1, trial 2, trial 3. We have in the graphic interface a tool for file organization, where we look for the timestamps of all the CSV files that are exported to group them into the same folder, and also to avoid problems with the synchronization and with the offline measurement. What we do is inside each of the files of each of the sensors, we look for the timestamp, similar as most of our colleagues that have already developed an Android app or iOS app. They use the SDK for doing that. As in our case, it's completely offline and it's an interface completely developed with Python. What we do, it's we just look for common timestamps between all the sensors and just crop and slice the data to have them completely aligned and to help us to analyze the results. And also we offer just a renaming of the folders, just in case if it's more comfortable for the user to work with this data. Okay, so regarding the analyze part, it's where we use our interface solution. As you can see here that just it's a quick demo. In this interface, you can choose the recording you want to analyze. You can pre-visualize joint angles to do the trimming. I will show just a short video after that, but I will need to do this introduction. We configure an interactive data viewer. We do some event detection, which sometimes it's rule-based, but also we use some artificial intelligence tools just for classification, for setting up the beginning of the cycle, the end of the cycle. And our main source of validation until the moment has been the MVN analyze system, getting quite similar results in if we refer to the joint angles. And also we get the spatial temporal parameters and a force estimation, okay, especially for gait and running, but I will explain it just with more insights in the next slide. Okay, this is just like a quick map of how it works. We have the app, we get the data, we do the analysis, and we also, with the graphic interface, we can offer a database. It can be very simple, just an Excel file, or it can be something more complex with some database, SQL database with Python. And after that, we offer the possibility to get a report directly to the user. Okay, some technical notes and use cases and about gait and running. What we do, we offer different models of contact detection based on tibia sensors or foot sensors, depending on the user, on the pattern, because it can change a little bit. We do some data processing, filtering. We do detection based on the acceleration and the gyroscope. This allows us to get some spatial parameters estimation because we have very well segmented cycles. So we do the drifting based on the start and end of the cycles. we get an estimation of the pelvis vertical oscillation, which we validate with the MVN analyze system. We also do detection of change of direction to allow users not only to use it in the treadmill, but also on ground conditions on any field. And the force estimation model for running is mainly based on the Clark's model, Spring model. And we are doing, but we have until now very promising results. We validate with force insoles, okay, wearable force insoles, which give us the vertical force. In the case of the gait, what we get is the direct estimation of the force in the single support stage, and in the double support, we do just a linear transfer model. We assume that the transference from the left foot to the right foot is linear. So we are able to crop or to decompose the signal, the bilateral signal of force with the pelvis sensor into two signals, one for the left foot and other one for the right foot. And we also get the joint angles and a stiffness value as we get the vertical oscillation and the vertical force based on Morin's model. And just as a quick example, you can see here more or less which is the result. This is the graphic interface, but I don't want just to lose too much time on this. Okay, for the case of the jump analysis, okay, what we do is we do more or less the same. We do a crop of different cycles. We use it for counter movement jump, squat jump, or hop jump. We have even a notebook, a Python notebook for analyzing squats. But what we do mainly is we use the maximum vertical acceleration. We do a phase segmentation and get some temporal parameters of how much has been each phase. And also we are able to provide the joint angles in each stage, which is very useful for asymmetries detection and just asymmetries in landing, or maybe different coordination patterns of movement. And just for finishing, I will just will share my screen, the video I have prepared. So you can see just a quick demo of all of this that I have been talking about, how it looks. So Martina, I will ask you please to confirm if the video is seen now.
Yes, I confirm.
Okay. Do you hear any audio, any voice, or?
We don't
Okay.
hear voice. We see your app.
Okay. So you are seeing running. It's playing.
It's now running. Now
Okay.
it's analyzing, and we see the graph.
Okay, because I don't see anything, but just what you see is that we just have first like a front page where we can see the file to import, the data we can import. And we also have a visualizer where we trim the signal. We can choose what part of the signal we would like to see. We can choose if you want to see the heel strikes, to offs. And after that, we get to the main visualizer where we can see the main joint angles in 3D planes. We can see hip, knee, ankle, depends on the amount of sensors. We can get some custom graphs. We can, in the table, see the joint angles at different values of the cycle, at heel strike, at 2 off, the range of motion. And I guess you are seeing now the report. You can get the report that it's generated. Okay, so which is a PDF report that it's just a matter of, it's a template. It can be personalized and configured to the needs of the user, but it's mainly a very quick result of all the analysis you have been doing with the graphic interface. And now for finishing, what we are working on from now on ahead, as you can see, we are just let me here. Okay, what we are working in, we are working mainly in. Okay, let me sorry. Okay, slide 17. We are working on expanding the capabilities of this solution to perform like a lap in a packet concept with adding some EMG sensors or insoles if it's needed, if there is wanted to. We're working on our own artificial intelligence models with subjects and users, the main purposes of improving the sensor scalability and reduction of the amount of sensors. We are applying this to cycling, where we're working on a project to reduce the amount of sensors from 7 to 3 based on cycling variables and cyclical movement. We're using also machine learning classification algorithms for step pattern classification, and also some artificial neural networks and regression neural networks to do time force curve regression, to be able to get like the time versus force curve validated initially with some wearable force in soles, but after that being able to get much more reliable pattern instead of using models, generic models, and this to be adapted to the user specific movement. And also we are working mainly on adding some avatar visualization and doing some packages. Okay, so because it's completely tailored, this solution, but it's also very useful if we have some DOM packages, for example, packages for gait, for running, for swimming, or for cycling, which are the main projects we're working in, and get the user to have a project delivered in much less time than what it takes now when it's completely customized and personalized. And just for finishing, this is the team. Okay, we're 3 people. Our colleague Maria, which is biomedical engineer, me, myself, I am my biomedical engineer and Master of Science in Artificial Intelligence, and our colleague Bruno, which is a PhD in sports science. And all 3 together, we discuss the main research lines, and we develop this kind of solutions to being able to meet the needs of the users when using XSense.dot. And okay, okay.
Right.
Yeah, that was our presentation of what we do currently.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much. And sorry for the technical issue. We could see really well your presentation. I'm sorry.
Okay, don't worry. I open it in another page.
Okay, okay, that's great. We have a few questions, but unfortunately, due to time constraint, we have to move to the other speaker. But I will make sure the people who ask questions will receive your answers. So
yes, please.
I will connect later. So thank you very much.
Thanks to you.
It's a pleasure, as usual.
Okay, thanks a lot. Goodbye.
I'm happy now to introduce Claudia Hofer. Hello, Claudia. Welcome.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to have been given the opportunity to present the gait analysis system of 4D vets here. It's a Swiss startup in the veterinary industry. I believe it's the only veterinary company here now, here at the Movella Developers Conference. Perhaps 2 sentences about our company as a priority. 4D Vets was founded in 2018 by Dr. Med-Vet Patrick Blettler-Monnier, a veterinarian from Frankendorf, Switzerland. Dr. Blettler is an orthopedic surgeon specializing in dogs. His clients are mainly working and service dogs who are brought from all over Europe to him for treatment. Already 14 years ago, Dr. Blettler started to develop a mobile gait analysis system as a supplement to the X-ray. In cooperation with the University of Applied Science of Northwestern Switzerland, a system that can show things that X-ray cannot see and dogs cannot say. 4D Vets is an owner-managed and owner-financed company. So when we started to develop the system, we had to face some challenges, especially with regard to the sensor technology, which we were going to choose. You can imagine that the veterinary doctors, they do not always measure in the practice, and they are not so careful with the system. So the technology must master the following challenges. They must be easy to transport. They must be applicable inside and outside. They must be fast to set up. Multi-kit using must be possible in clinics, and the technical support and maintenance was important for us. Movella could give the answer on all the points and could solve the issue with their MPV sensors. They're small and lightweight, they're insensible to light or weather. We need no calibration on site, which is completely contrary to the visual measurements. Two kits can work side by side simultaneously, which is very much needed in clinics. The sensors are easily replaceable, and Movella is a European company, which was also something that was important for us to have near access. So that was about the sensors, and please go to the next slide. Exactly. So with the decision for the appropriate sensor technology, LupoGate, as our technology is called, could be developed. Positively innovative. LupoGate brings a completely new component to the work of the veterinary orthopedic surgeon. Away from the purely static image on the X-ray, orthopedic surgeons can now also measure the patients in motion and analyze the data, in part also merging with the results from the X-ray, which is completely new. It has not been the case until now, and it opens many doors. The whole thing is mobile, which means we don't work with a treadmill, and the vet or the physiotherapist can take the kit with them when they are out and about. Since animals cannot speak, LupoGate makes this connection between the patient and the vet for a pain that may not be seen on the X-ray or not be communicated by the vet, by the pet, but is definitively present in the dog. LupoGate essentially consists of two components, the hardware and the software. The hardware consists of 6 IMU sensors, 100 Hz data acquisition frequency, and the jacket. The jacket is patented. We offer it in 12 different standard sizes. Additional grade sizes are available. And the whole kit comes with a tablet with a pre-installed software that has been developed by Podivets, and chargeable batteries for 1 day of measuring, 6 hours of full work. The second is the software, which is consisting of an app for data collection and a web-based cloud solution for data analysis and visualization with 3 different programs that we offer. The one is the puppy program for prevention. The other one is growing for older dogs, and then the adult program where we treat working dogs and athletes mainly, or older dogs, or post-operation dogs. As a summary, the 6 sensors in the jacket collect gait data at predefined anatomical position. The data then is stored on a cloud server and accessible for analysis and export through a web-based management software. And the gait parameters, which are the most important ones for us, in our case, is a stride length, range of motion, symmetry, step phases, which are recorded. So basically, we offer one solution for all of them, for the puppies, for the couch lovers, but also for the hard workers and the athletes. And the system is even suitable for fearful dogs because we have no acclimatization time. Okay, I'd like to show you now a short video of one of our dog patients so that you can see how easy LupoGate is to use. Can you run the video, please? Okay, fantastic.
Please go ahead.
The 6 here you see the dog with the jacket and the 6 sensors. They are positioned in the jacket, and with the tablet we record the data as measured. The dog walks next to his owner on a flat surface at the normal walking pace for 20 meters and back again. The veterinary assistant can collect the data with the sensors on her tablet and sends the data on the computer of the veterinary. So he is saving time because he can do some other job in the meantime and has then the correct data for analysis. LupoGate is mainly about the following points which we can cover. Support for growth when you treat puppies or for skeletal problems in older dogs. detection for musculoskeletal problems, early diagnosis, after all, then help in the diagnosis of complex pathologies, especially when the problem cannot be seen on the X-ray. This is very, very often the case, much more than you can think. And monitoring of process in the rehabilitation of patients, for example, after operations, accidents, or illnesses. This is, by the way, this is Dr. Blattler with one of his young patients. Exactly. We can essentially measure 34 different measurement parameters, whereby the veterinarian can select which ones he wants to see for the respective patients by setting a check mark in each case. So it's easy for him. Huh? Here on this page, we have listed the most frequently used and most meaningful parameters, and these are the peak vertical force, the spectral energy, the range of motion, of course, symmetries, normalized step length, and swing phase. And all the measurements are displayed in 2D and 3D, so that it's also clear for the dog owners who are not veterinarians. It's easier for them to understand what the vet can see and what treatment has to be done. What exactly does LupoGait? LupoGait, through its jacket sensor technology, enables non-invasive, objective and evidence-based diagnosis of skeletal disorders in less than 10 minutes, with measurements that can be shared directly in PDF form. The ideal thing is the vet can have a look at the measurements, and he can share the PDF directly with the physiotherapists, for example. He sends it to them, or he sends it to the owners who shares it with the physiotherapists, etc. So it's very easy to handle. It supports early detection of diseases that would otherwise not yet be visible. It further supports non-invasive treatments, and it provides an easy comparison between different treatments. We have also had very good results in monitoring the healing processes after operations. The dog can be measured even in its home, and the jacket adapts perfectly to its movement without constricting it. It's also very, very good for fear dogs, for example. Okay, LupoGait measures the dog when it's in a normal movement, which means it also shows functional changes through the use of kinematics. This is really new in the veterinary medicine. At least I know in human not, but in veterinary, this is really is an invention. Through this, not only undiscovered pathologies are detected, but also progress monitoring of the lameness and the therapy are made possible. Based on the natural step movement, LupoGait provides directly resulting values, objective, reproducible, and graphically displayed. Our first scientific paper has been published. We have also a scientific approach because we have to prove what we measure and what we interpret. Otherwise, clinics would not use our system. Four more papers are in progress and will be peer-reviewed this summer. So it took a bit of time to make all these studies, but the results were very good. And the first paper that we have is essentially about the fact that even simple algorithms can extract relevant information from inertial measurements and are comparable with results from much more complex approaches. Next papers that we are working on will be about classification of hip dysplasia in connection with features, different hip angles and puppy study, and about reproducibility. These papers will be peer-reviewed in summer this year. The reasons for success. Basically, if we talk about the benefits of LupoGait, they are early detection and prophylaxis, diagnosis of existing pathology, and before they are visible on the X-ray. This is one of the main points, before they are visible on the X-ray, because then you can correct things, then you can interfere, and afterwards sometimes it's much more difficult. The whole thing is simple and reliable without training the patient, and it works over a walking distance of only 20 meters. It also saves cost because the measurements are not carried out by the vet, but by the assistant. And compared to our competitors, LupoGate has a higher number and more accurate measurement parameters, an integrated cloud database with reference parameters, and it's easier to analyze data. Measurements can be comparable over time. And now, because we are of course developing further, I would like to give you a short outlook on our R&D, what we are doing now for the future. We are constantly working on improving ourselves, which is needed because in the medical industry, you know as good as I, you cannot stand still. Hip dysplasia is one of the main diseases that an orthopedist encounters in dogs. We are in the process of developing an artificially intelligent tool that will use machine learning to diagnose faster, safer, and more error-free in the future. Using artificial intelligence, we aim to combine the IMU technology with X-ray. The goal is to improve objective diagnosis for different pathologies. Here in this point, we are quite far already. We do that also in cooperation with the University of Applied Science. And we have there one of the engineers that is on our payroll who is working on this. LupoGate is often used with athletes and working dogs, a new software capable of displaying and analyzing specific performance indicators should do the job. Among other things, we will orientate ourselves on products that are already used in the human field by athletes. This is mainly what we have planned for R&D. We are already working on it, right? And with this slide, I would like to conclude my presentation and thank you very much for your attention and interest. This book, Lupomove Puppy, is the first in a series of books written by Dr. Patrick Blattler on the subject. It's not only interesting for veterinaries, but also for every dog owner, and it can be obtained via Amazon. I hope I have been able to give you an insight and some interesting points on what we do in the veterinary industry. And I'm of course glad to answer your questions together with my colleague Sebastian Tabanel, who is also here today because he's our head of IT and knows practically everything about the software that we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you very much for the presentation. It's really interesting to see how wearables, IMU, and our sensor can be applied not only to analyze the biomechanics of humans, but also of dogs. And especially just to mention, you have seen not specifically Movella DOT, but Movella DOT Pro. It doesn't work with Bluetooth communication protocol, but with a wireless communication protocol. But still, the sensor fusion algorithm is the same. So the sensor and the quality of that data are comparable. And we don't have specific technical question, but some curiosity. We have now to move to the next speaker, but I will make sure you will receive all the questions. And thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and talk to you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, and we will of course take care that all the questions are answered whenever you send them to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a nice rest of the day. It is now time to introduce Nicholas Buckley, Nick from Teleton Kids Institute. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you so much, Martina, and hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can see your presentation, and I hope you don't have any problems.
Excellent. No, I can see everything all
Great.
firing on all cylinders. So just wanted to start off with a little bit about me, because I probably come from a little bit of a different background to a lot of the other presenters, some of whom are, I'm sure, much more technically skilled than myself. I'm actually a physiotherapist, or a physical therapist if you're in the United States, and really spent my physiotherapy clinical career for the past 6 or 7 years in a range of different positions, both here in Australia and also did a bit of work in the UK, mostly in a disability setting. I also worked in aged care and in private practice for a little bit, but I really enjoyed doing my honours when I was at uni and always thought I'd find myself back in research. So the work I'm presenting today is as part of my PhD, which I've been doing for the past 3 years at Curtin University here in Perth in Western Australia, and also Telethon Kids Institute, which is the biggest child health research institute in Western Australia. This sort of triad of concept really illustrates the basis of my PhD and also where the Movella DOT can help us explore this area. So gravity is a constant, obviously, on all of us throughout our daily life. But really my PhD aims to explore the interaction between gravity, how sleep biomechanics distribute the force of gravity over time, and then how that may have impacts on our skeletal symmetry. So sleep biomechanics is a little bit of it's an invented term in some ways that we came up with to describe exactly what it is that we're trying to explore. And I guess what we're trying to use devices like the Movella DOTs to be able to have a look at. So movements of body segments during sleep and the positions the individual adopts, both of the whole body and discrete segments. So really looking at both a segment specific, so arms, legs, torso, and at the body as a whole, what positions they're in and how they move. Because people don't stop moving when they're asleep. A lot of, I'm sure all of us have favorite positions that we fall asleep in. You hear a lot of, I'm a tummy sleeper, or I'm a back sleeper, I'm a side sleeper. People definitely have preferred positions to fall asleep in. But from the work we've done and also from the literature, people definitely don't stay still while they're asleep. Typical repositioning rate is 10 to 12 big repositions per night in adults. It's slightly faster from kids. And really the biological function of this is somewhat debated, but that one I outlined beforehand in terms of movement to distribute the force of gravity so your skeleton stays symmetrical was first advanced in the late 60s by a couple called Fulford and Brown, who were research partners. And it really was in the disability world. So in, and that's where a lot of the work since has focused, because in people with, and particularly a lot of this work has focused on cerebral palsy, repositioning during sleep appears to be much less frequent. So there's this commonly used scale in physiotherapy called the GMFCS, or Gross Motor Function Classification System. Most of the work has been done on the more physically severe end of cerebral palsy. So GMFCS 4 and 5, so typically electric wheelchair users, and not as much has been done on the earlier end. So we really set out with my PhD to explore across the spectrum of physical ability in both typically developing kids and also kids with cerebral palsy. Just touching on why we care about altered sleep biomechanics and how it impacts body shape. Really, body shape distortion at the end stages of things are incredibly serious. So you can end up with, unfortunately, really severe body shape distortions, which can be life-limiting, but also really affect people's ability to function in daily life and live healthy, happy lives. So really making, understanding where this is coming from in the first place and being able to prevent it, either through supporting people in symmetrical positions while they're lying, or really understanding the pathophysiology of where it comes from, is important in terms of addressing these deformities proactively before they develop. But that's complicated. I'm sure I don't need to preach to the choir here about measuring biomechanics being difficult. And a number of different things has been trialed in terms of sleep biomechanics. So two of the common applications are overnight videography. So you can see in the middle here an infrared application. Often they're actually security cameras with infrared capabilities, because obviously people like to sleep in the dark. These work, but they are the data setup is really laborious. Also, it's typically human raters who have to dig through hours and hours of video footage, and that is laborious, but also induces human rater error. So it's not a preferable solution, and it's also not really clinically applicable. We kind of were hearing from the previous speaker about having a easily instituted system in clinical environments. Very similar here. Rolling into someone's bedroom and trying to set up 20 cameras doesn't typically go over particularly well. Accelerometers have been used and used to good effect, but then that leads on to the second challenge in this area, which is the reporting framework. So once you've got these huge streams of data, how do you A, analyze them, and B, easily explain them to families of people with disabilities, often who don't necessarily have a technical or a clinical background, and who often have a lot of other things going on in their lives, in a clear, easy to understand format that can aid in clinical decision making and conversation. So really, these were the two things that we set out to tackle as part of my PhD. Which brought us to the Movella DOTs. We definitely, and as I'm sure a lot of other people did, kissed a few frogs on the way to finding the DOTs as small, usable IMUs with a really nice interface that just you could pick up and go with on a phone. And so we paired them. And the other point was that I could use them. I'm not a super technical person, but also more importantly, the people I was doing my studies with, who are families of people with kids with disabilities, could also use them. The idea being that I didn't have to be there to do all the data collection. I would set people up with these devices. They would record data for a number of nights, and then I'd come back and get them, which is the intention of how a clinical assessment would work. Effectively, what we did, the arrangement that we use, is we put 4 dots, 4 of the 5, in a standard set, one on the sternum, one just underneath the belly button, and then one each just above either kneecap, and then really measure those various segments. And that was the, I guess, the tool half of the assessment. And then the other half is the output. So what we did is took the transverse rotation orientation and output that to what we call the BODS, which is the body orientation during sleep framework, which is this circle here on the right, where effectively we've divided the 360 degrees of lying rotation. So if you're lying on your back, you would be in 0 degrees of rotation and in position 18. If you were lying on your front, you'd be in 180 degrees of rotation, you'd be in position 9, and so on. And with that very simple framework, we can describe simply where people are, in what position people are lying at various segments. So really quickly can create this composite picture of what position people are lying in. So the work that we've done to date, because really we needed to, the dots have not really been used for this purpose before, and it's obviously quite a different application for IMUs than is typically seen in terms of measuring walking, jumping, all that kind of thing. We're using them for a much longer period, and we're also using them in lying positions. So what we needed to first do is have a look at validity. So we used the motion analysis laboratory at Curtin University. Got a big tick there. It was very, very accurate. So we felt confident in moving forward and using them in further studies. We also really wanted to encounter the feasibility, and starting with adults, of introducing these pretty usable, like they're very usable in terms of the technical interface, but in terms of wearing them throughout the night, how did people tolerate them? So really things like looking at drift, battery life, recording reliability. We had some issues in the early days trying to use, and sorry, Martina, if I get this wrong, but it's the wireless or the Bluetooth side of things, the direct streaming capability of of the dots, just purely out of the length of time that we're recording. We're recording for effectively the whole battery life, so it's sort of 6 to 8 hours. And we did have issues with data dropping out. So now we use the offline capability, and that's much improved. And also we had some issues with participant comfort in terms of how much attachment we were using with taping them down with fix and mold dressing. That was addressed by using less dressing, which risks a little bit more dislodgement of the sensors, but that's only really happened a couple of times, and it's an acceptable hedge to allow for better comfort. And finally, we compared it to the current clinical tool, which is overnight videography. So I did a sometimes mildly spooky study, but it was very interesting. Basically got people to sleep with clothes on, but with no bedclothes, so we could see exactly their body position throughout the night, and wearing with the dots recording concurrently with overnight videography. And then we compared the output of the dots to human rated videography, and it had very high agreement. So we felt really confident from these pieces of work that the dots were very accurate, well tolerated in adults, and then were also compared really well to what's currently in clinical use. So the current study and the final study of my PhD is really the interesting one. It's assessing feasibility in typically developing children and adolescents, and also those with cerebral palsy, because if the tool's not feasible, then all of our findings are kind of a moot point. If people can't tolerate the assessment very well, then it really influences our data. But also, assuming that it is feasible, we want to compare and contrast the sleep biomechanical profiles of people with and without cerebral palsy, and also across ages and other various demographic features. So this study is actually ongoing at the moment. We've collected all our data and we're in data analysis, but what it looked like was an initial 1.5 hour session where I would go out to people's houses, and train them up on how to use the study equipment. So I'd provide the dots, I'd provide written instructions, I'd provide a reference video, and I would provide the phone and everything itself. Then I would leave people with these devices, and they'll record for 5 nights in a row independently, each night, wearing the dots on chest, pelvis, left and right legs. Littler kids require obviously the assistance of their parents to get set up, older kids. So we did from 5 years up to 18 years, so really capturing young adults as well. They can typically record their own data without help. And we also have a few questionnaires in there to get some data, and really that's where the feedback questionnaire after the assessment is where we're capturing that feasibility data. And then I went back and picked up the data. So as I mentioned, we have just captured all our data. We got about 11 people with cerebral palsy and about 20 typically developing people. And this is just a little bit of a snapshot into what sleep biomechanics looks like. So this is this top graph. It is obviously a histogram of people's orientation throughout the night, the middle being 0, so being supine, lying flat on your back, and then obviously deviation up and down being rolling to left side, left side, right side, and the extremes of that being lying on your tummy in prone. And you can really see that this 13-year-old girl, excuse me, changed orientation a lot, really moved around, so you can see, but there's also long flat periods where she's obviously not moving, and people don't constantly roll around and move a lot when they're asleep. Sleep's typically characterized by brief changes of orientation followed by long periods of immobility. I'm sure that's not news to very many people, but you compare that to this 13-year-old male participant who is GMSCS5 cerebral palsy, so the most severe physically end of cerebral palsy, and you can see there's virtually no movement. So on the right side, we've output that as rose plots, and you can really see that that 13-year-old female participant has quite a varied diet, if you like, of position. And so really coming back to that, sharing the influence of gravity on her skeleton, it's unsurprising that she keeps a symmetrical skeletal structure versus this 13-year-old boy who really is in a stationary position for much longer, and so runs the risk of gravity unduly influencing his skeletal symmetry. So where to next? Finished the data analysis and write-up for this study. But beyond the scope of my PhD, really this PhD will deliver a proven, validated, accessible tool for tracking sleep biomechanics over time, which should be really interesting for longitudinal studies. Not just in cerebral palsy, though, there's all sorts of other clinical populations where this is applicable and currently being examined in the literature. So Parkinson's is another really big, interesting areas, and also things like sleep apnea. So the relationship of head to trunk in how that works. So this would have applicability there, and also on that longitudinal piece, following body shape distortion over time, the measure of that, and also measuring sleep biomechanics over time to see the correlation there. Clinically, it also has lots of applicability, so really justifying the prescription of supported lying equipment for those people who require support to lie in a symmetrical position, brackets and bolsters and things to keep them in that symmetrical position, and also measuring efficacy of that prescribed equipment once in place. But that's all for the future, and that is my presentation for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much. Amazing work. I read your papers before inviting you, so really appreciate your presentation. We have a few questions. So first question is, how did you deal with the relatively low battery time?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Effectively, we took everything that we could get. And that was particularly a challenge with the, so we used the dots right from launch, and obviously the version 1 dots had a significantly lower battery time. So it was anywhere between sort of, I think it was around 5 to 6 hours in the version 1s, and then it was out to, yeah, in the beginning. And then obviously version 2 was a real blessing for us in that it could we got significantly improved battery life. We did consider, and you consider lots of things in the middle of a PhD, but we did consider trying to do sort of external power supplies to extend the life of extend the recording window, if you like. But just because we're working with kids and we're also working with kids with disabilities, taping coin batteries to the outside of devices, I'm sure sort of I'm raising the hairs on the back of the necks of all the parents out there. You wouldn't really get that through an ethics committee. So we decided at the end of the day, we just have to accept that as a limitation of this particular study. But with versions 3, 4, 5 of the dots, we'll get out to, I don't know, 24 hours recording, I'm sure. Basically, we have proven the methodology here, and just extended battery life means that you can get more and more timing into the future. But really, where we're sitting at the moment is that sort of 7 to 8 hour chunk, and that's that can be considered a representative sample over the course of a night. All
right. Thank you for answering, and happy to know that you can deal with it and you can find a workaround, even though it's not the ideal time. And we have another question. So, did any of your participants show signs of discomfort while wearing the first sensors, especially when lying in a prone position?
You would be surprised. So, one of the things that we were quite concerned with, especially with kids, is obviously the sensors are relatively small, and that's one of the advantages of them. But compared relatively to the size of an adult versus a 5-year-old, they're obviously relatively much bigger. And so that's sort of a concern that we had feasibility-wise, are these just going to be massive, like a massive lump on your chest and make it difficult to lie in your front? Once people are asleep, it doesn't actually tend to make that much of a difference. And also they're low enough profile that they kind of squish in relatively okay. So surprisingly, it definitely was a hypothesis that we had going in that they would potentially create some issues in terms of discomfort lying on your front. But no, happily, that wasn't so much of an issue. And also, it part of the finding that came out of the sleep biomechanics, that Rose plot particularly, people don't actually spend that much time throughout the night lying directly, perfectly prone, flat on their fronts, which would be obviously the most uncomfortable area. People tend to lie in some degree of rotation even when they're on their fronts. So that's enough of a gap to allow you the sort of few millimeters for the dot to not press into you really, really hard.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for answering, for presenting, Nick, especially so late in the evening for you.
No worries. Happy to.
Thank you very much. Appreciate. Looking forward to seeing your future papers and in general improvements and research. Thank you very much.
No worries at all. No problems. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye. Okay. It's time now for the last speaker, Dr. Thomas Nicodelis. Thomas, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Hello.
Hi. How are you doing?
Fine. Thank you very much.
So Thomas is a PhD and also part of R&D of Kinvent, and he's now he will talk about Kinvent, his research, and the future of Kinvent with Movella DOT.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for the invitation. I'm actually working in the university, Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, and I work on the biomechanics lab of the School of Physical Education and Sports Science. Actually, my connection with Kinvent is that I had the chance to collaborate with the company for many years, even before Kinvent really started existing, and I had the chance to work with their tools, and of course they built some of custom solutions that we needed for implementing our research. So I will speak a few words about Kinvent. Kinvent was established in 2018, and it focuses on rehabilitation and human performance, mainly produces tools to measure force and to assess balance and posture. Of course, it is based on wireless technology, and their tools are of high quality. What their ambition is to empower healthcare and sports professionals with accessible, accurate, and innovative biomechanical assessment tools, both for physical performance and to improve the quality of life. Nevertheless, although Kinvent is not that famous for the IMUs, they also have IMUs, and we use them to measure rotation, and actually we asked them to build custom solutions for us in the past. Here you can see the main problem that we faced, and in all the applications that I will show you. And the basic idea was that we faced of the presentation is that we faced a lot of methodological challenges and technical difficulties during our research in the past years. And of course, we had new ways that were open for us using IMUs. but I will show you how we handled the problems through some examples of our work. We worked for more than a decade with IMUs, and we even had our own custom-built systems at the beginning. The most simple solution that we use is to align the axis of the IMU with an anatomical axis of the body, mainly the trunk. And we try to remove drift during the integration process. So at most of the cases, we do that post-acquisition. And although we managed to do that, this was tough, at least at the beginning, because we had to implement our own algorithms and features like the data fusion that you share, drift removal, and in general, advanced algorithms were not available. This solution that you see here didn't work for all the cases that I will show you. So one other difficult thing that we face in our research was that we did a lot of things out of the lab, and actually we did a lot of things in the water. So we had to ask Kinvent to build for us a custom system for swimming, which is a special case, of course, because we need to have waterproof sensors, like the dots that are waterproof now. And we need to store the data locally because we don't have the option of real-time transmission of the data. So, as I foretold, now waterproof sensors are commercially available, but and this is a feature that you offer, among other. But before some years, this was not the case. And what we asked Kinvent to do for us was to build a pair of two sensors of 6 degrees of freedom each. And we had to have an SD data logger and a microcontroller to control all the functions that we needed, basic functions like sync light to synchronize with the video, and of course do the acquisition and downloading to the PC. What we normally do at most of the cases that I will show you is to put one sensor in the upper trunk and the other in the pelvis, as you see in the photos. Even this was revolutionary for us because like 25 years ago, when I did my PhD in kinematics and swimming, 3D kinematics, I was able to use only conventional video and had to analyze like a couple of strokes for each athlete. And it took me like 3 months just to do the manual digitization. Afterwards, what we were able to do back then was just to perform ANOVA on discrete features, which were derived from one arm stroke. So this was were the analysis that we were able to do back then. Using the sensors, we had long data series. And for example, we could analyze 50 meters of swimming. And we could have different methodologies to see the data and answer to research questions. So I will show you an example of the butterfly technique where we investigated the effect of fins or flippers, the effect of fatigue during the 50-meter all-out trial, and the effect of gender on the butterfly swimming technique. Here in the video, you see how we synchronize the data with the video, and I hope you see the video. Do you see the video?
Yeah, we can see the video.
Okay. The red line represents the pelvis, and the blue line represents the C7. We are viewing flexion extension, the rotation of flexion extension, and what is clear is that the pelvis of the particular swimmer rotates more at the beginning compared to the end of the trial, while the opposite is the case for the C7. And this is an indication of what fatigue does to the system. Afterwards, we investigated if fins impose a different technique. We use fins for acquiring speed, power, and improved technique. But what about the specificity of training? Is the principle of specificity does this principle stand, or we violate this principle? Is the technique different? So having this abundance of data, we tried to guess through a machine learning approach when we swim with fins and when without. And we managed to have an accuracy in our random forest model of 78% of predicting the fins condition. So we use supervised machine learning techniques to train this model. And we managed to give a takeaway message to the coaches that since these two techniques are different, they must respect the rule of specificity. But okay, they are different, but the idea is there, but at what points are they different? So here you can see the power spectrums of blue with the no fins condition and red the fins condition for the pelvis and C7, where it is clear that red, the fins condition, is less noisy than the normal swimming. So it is different, but it's not necessarily good to be less noisy because the pattern is less flexible. And here we still don't see the effect of fatigue because we did not do a time frequency analysis, but just the whole trial for power analysis. Thanks to the IMU, we had a lot of data, so the perspective of the time of the fatigue over time could be performed. Here I will show you the results in the time domain for now. Again, with the blue, you see the no fins condition, and with the red, you see the fins condition. On the right, it's the male, and on the left is the female group. And on the upper part of the graph is the pelvis, and then the lower is the trunk. What we did was to take the whole trial, all the strokes, and separate the data in quartiles. So we took the second and third quartile to represent the middle point here, and the first meters and the finish represented the other two quartiles. So what we found out was that trunk rotates more with fins here. So this is different from the normal technique. And we also found that females rotate their pelvis more than males, at least at the beginning of the trial, while this phenomenon was depressed as the trial progresses. So we found also the effect of fatigue. We also investigated fatigue in another example of running biomechanics, of running to exhaustion, where we had to use a different setup. We had to ask Kinvent to produce for us wired IMUs to match our needs, and we had to synchronize them with force plates, as you will see here, because we had the runners to run on an instrumented treadmill. We had two force plates of Kinvent underneath the treadmill, and we had two IMUs. also we had a gas analyzer that helped us to establish where on the data the second ventilatory threshold was found. And as we incremented speed, we observed how the mechanical characteristics of movement changed. So what we did, since we had all these data, again, with all this complicated protocol in terms of electronics that I showed you before, we tried to to have a classification of the data based on the anaerobic ventilatory threshold, which was used as a cutoff point of the classes. This threshold represents the point in time where the fatigue starts to accumulate it, because we get in the anaerobic state where fatigue is accumulated. Here you can see the roll angle of C7, and we extracted for each step the angular displacement, the range between the red dots, as you can see here, to use it as a feature for the next processing, which was machine learning. So we had one data point for each step. Here you see all the steps. On average, there were like 3,000 steps for every participant. And we used the ventilatory threshold to cut the points before and after this point. And we tried to implement a machine learning algorithm to see which were the more sensitive features that could classify the enderic in the fatigue states. What we found out was that all these data allowed us to understand that trunk rotation was the most important predictor of the model, which is quite logical, because it is very important, trunk is very important for maintaining balance. But the interesting thing is that when we did, because we had a lot of data for every person, we did the same models for each individual. And when we did that, we found that although trunk rotation seems to be like a universal characteristic that is a predictor, is a good predictor for every person, still each person has a unique mixture of features that form the prediction of the fatigue states. So this single subject analysis perspective was quite revealing and was feasible only due to these large data volumes that we could have using the IMUs. I will show you some very short, mainly case studies of balance and rehabilitation, and I will like to discuss with you how we used the IMUs in these special cases. Just recently, we put people in an elevator and we tried to assess their balance when the elevator was moving up and down and they had their eyes closed. Here you can see the distinct force patterns when moving upwards and downwards. And here on the upper part, you see the baseline in the yellow. When moving upwards, our weight gets larger instantly, and then we return to the baseline, and afterwards in the red, when we decelerate to stop the elevator, our weight gets less, and the opposite happens in the downward direction. So we studied through the convex plates, we studied the center of pressure displacement, and we saw that when the elevator moves upwards, our balance gets worse, both when we accelerate and both when we decelerate, when the elevator starts and stops. Before trying to give some mechanical explanations, we did the following. We put an IMU on the floor of the elevator, and it was interesting that we found out that when the specific elevator moves upwards, the acceleration and the deceleration phase has higher values than when it moves downwards. So it is more demanding at the specific elevator to move upwards. So we have to study many more elevators to understand the phenomenon. But IMU helped us to be practical on this issue. So returning to our first custom-built system, it was quite different than DOTs, of course, but we tried to have some characteristics, not exactly similar as DOTs, but for example, we didn't have like 16-bit resolution, and the device was quite heavier. Also, it was not a very sophisticated synchronization system with the video, the blinks, and all this acquisition thing. And we didn't have a user-friendly app to do our work. So finally, we managed to do that using a lot of biomechanics, electronics, and programming. And here you can see a case of avascular osteonecrosis of the talus, where the doctor performed a percutaneous drilling, and we tried to analyze gait. And what we found, first of all, it was easy to detect the gait events from linear acceleration using the sensor on the foot. So here you see the stance and the swing phase. And here you can see the angle dorsiplantar flexion. The stance phase and the swing phase are separated by the vertical lines. Blue represents the healthy angle, and red is pre-operation and black is post-operation. It was quite clear that the vertical lines, the black ones, are even to the right compared to the red. So we managed to enlarge the stance phase in the affected limb, which is desirable. In terms of angular displacement, okay, we did a little bit more mobility, but for the doctor, this was an evidence-based medicine, and he liked it a lot. Back to the water. This is our main challenge. We did some efforts to do gait in the water. Here you see a person after a stroke walking in the rehabilitation center out of the pool and inside the pool. What we know from the literature is that for typical persons, the water has the ability to reduce dorsiflexion during stance. What we found out here with the black lines was that dorsiflexion during stance, or let's say plantar flexion, because it was plantar flexed, as you see here, reduced. So, and dorsiflexion during takeoff was a little bit increased. So, not permanently, but just when walking in the water, we managed to reduce the foot drop, which is an indication of the effect of hydrotherapy for the specific patient. So, a more challenging one, and the last one. We used IMU on C7 for gaming rehabilitation. It's another field which popularity increases now. So we used a 9 degrees of freedom sensor with RF communication, not a dedicated Bluetooth protocol, because we needed to synchronize it with the force plates to drive a plane either through the sensor or through the center of pressure. And we studied learning and transfer of learning from one flying mode to the other. We did that only to healthy young people so far. So this approach is quite challenging and different from the others because we had to do real-time integration and we had to feed the virtual reality model in real time. And we played the game for 8 minutes, and the accumulation of drift was quite different and not as controllable as the other cases. So you can see here the block diagram of what we did. The upper part is quite straightforward. When they played the game through, they drove the plane through force plates. We just downsampled the 200 hertz of the COP and fed them to the game. But when we had to control the airplane through the sensor, we followed different steps. First, we had to remove the offset during standing. Then we had to constantly perform a control of whether the person was stable and vertical. So what we did was checking the verticality using the vector of acceleration constantly, and if the body was stable and vertical for 2 milliseconds, then we created a unit quaternion, like we zeroed the offset at this point. Otherwise, we had to use a filter fusion algorithm proposed by Madwick, which by itself didn't work without this static and vertical calibration. Then we had to downsample and give the data to the game. So you can see here that this is how the game was played, and when the person was standing stable and vertical for 200 milliseconds, we did constantly the recalibrating to avoid the drift. So using these devices, we were able to have more sophisticated analysis, like measure the jerk and the power in the frequency domain, and understand how transfer of learning works. To conclude, the last 15 years, we started working with IMUs. We were able to perform from descriptive analysis of one representative cycle, analysis in long data series. So we could use subject-specific analysis, which demand a lot of data from the same person. We went out of the lab in the pool for some times, and what we got, not easily, because we had to build a lot of systems with collaboration with Kinvent, a very good and excellent, I'd say, value for money. And we managed to address all these methodological challenges, not easy, but we also managed to have new research questions and answer some of them. What we foresee now and why we are here and discussing from the part of Kinvent at this Movella Congress. We foresee that we will use a commercial device, let's say, like yours, like DOTS, which is waterproof, which give us the ability to have multiple sensors. For example, when I show you the example of running, we just measured the trunk with 7 sensors. Now we are planning, actually, we're starting with your sensors on Friday. We will put 7 sensors, 3 at each leg, and one on the track. So data will be quite different. And we will have the opportunity just to press a button and have the data without all this trouble of signal processing and programming that I showed you before. And hopefully, personally, I foresee a collaboration of the two companies in order, because you have in the, synchronization function for many other systems. I hope that you will integrate through a collaboration with Kinvent all these features with Kinvent's palette tools, which we have all of them, so we can use them in our lab. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas, for your presentation, also for to show all the experience you have with IMU's wearable sensor, and really looking forward to see the implementation with Kinvent solution. We have a question from the audience regarding the gait in the pool study. How many sensors did you use to get an accurate estimation of ankle angles?
Okay, we did some validations with Vicon. We used 2 sensors, and because the movement was, for example, in butterfly. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah, you're okay.
Because the movement was executed, we only had flexion extension. It was quite easy, and we used 2 sensors. One at the C7 and one at the pelvis. But we didn't calculate joint angles there. We calculate the rotation of the segment that we had put the sensor. Regarding gait, it was more tricky. We had to validate it with Vicon. We had to decide about the rotation, the Euler angles rotation. Which series of rotation we will use, and we decided what to do based on the validation that we did with Vicon. But every case was a different one. And it is very important what Kira answers. Yes, indeed, some participants, especially in swimming, it was quite difficult not to feel discomfort, because we had to have the controller on the body, not only the sensors. The sensors had to communicate through cable with the microprocessor unit, so which was even heavier, and we had difficulties on attaching them to the person.
Okay, thank you. Another question is related to drift. So how did you compensate for any drift?
Yeah, I show you the example where the drift was linear. The drift depends in a lot of things. I'm talking from my experience. And one thing that we had in swimming was that we had a constant velocity. And the time intervals that we captured were small, like less than 40 seconds. And even in gait, we also had the ability to, they didn't walk a lot. But so the integration and the drift removal was quite easy, because we had a linear approximation of it. And it worked even through a simple integration, or even using the Madwig algorithm, using some different values in the beta function. It was quite similar, the result. But when we did the airplane, we had hard time dealing with drift. So that is why I show you like this stable and vertical trick, let's say, of recalibrating in real time which is like removing the drift in real time.
Mhm.
So we didn't implement complex algorithms like using Kalman filters, like what you do. And I hope that we won't have to deal with this issue, since we are going to use the commercial products from now on.
Okay, thanks for answering. Yeah, indeed, with a dot sensor, we really compensate to any interferences. Also, the drift is compensated. So hopefully you won't have the same problem. And also regarding the calibration, we also have some function heading reset. So the let's say measurement and analysis will be for sure easier. And another question is about the accuracy of data in water. I can answer Movella DOT side. There is no difference between using dot in water or not in water, indeed. So the accuracy is the same. There are no other questions. Do you want to add anything, Thomas?
No, thank you very much for having me here, and it was quite interesting for me to hear all the speakers before me.
All right. Thank you very much for joining to speak and to talk about your solution, and looking forward to see improvements and future development.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye. So this is the end of the first day. Thank you everybody for joining. I really hope you enjoyed the conference and you learned something new, and please stay tuned. We can meet again tomorrow, same time, with a different agenda. As you can see, we will host 4 speakers, and at the end, a panel discussion about the usage of DOT SDK and integration with other devices. We will have one of our iOS developers, Javen, and CEO, CTO from other companies, especially Pekka and Atanase. So stay tuned. See you tomorrow, and have a nice rest of the day, the evening, the night, depending on the area of the world. Thank you very much, and see you tomorrow.